What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my top 30 Superflex rookie rankings before the NFL draft. I'll obviously update these in the days after the draft, but this is going to be my last video before Thursday. So running through my top 30, also splitting these players up into different tiers so you can see where I kind of have these players grouped together. As always, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Which players do you like more or less than me? And let's just dive right into it. So we're going to start off in tier 1. Going to have two players here. It's going to be Caleb Williams as my 101 and then Marvin Harrison Jr. here at number 2. At this point, Caleb Williams is my clear, 101. He's the locked-in number 1 pick. He's going to be going to a great situation with the Bears, so that's why I have him as my top option. Quarterbacks and Superflex just so unbelievably valuable, and I think from day one, he's probably going to be a back-end round 1 startup pick. And then for Marvin Harrison Jr., I actually have him and Malik Neighbors in the same wide receiver tier, but I just think the overwhelming consensus is that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the top option. So just the value you'd be able to get for trading away Marvin Harrison Jr., I do think he belongs in a tier above Malik Neighbors at this point, and I also think he has the better odds of landing in a top landing spot because you have the Cardinals at 4, you have the Chargers at 5. It seems pretty likely that the Vikings, maybe another team, are going to trade up to either pick 4 or pick 5 to draft J.J. McCarthy. So then it might only leave, one of those top landing spots for a wide receiver. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is the overwhelming favorite to be the first wide receiver off the board. So that's my tier 1. Now looking at tier 2, we're going to go Malik Neighbors, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Brock Bowers, Rome Odunze, and J.J. McCarthy. Already mentioned Neighbors. I think very highly of him. He's right there with Marvin Harrison Jr. And if he somehow does end up with a better landing spot, then I would bump him ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr. Then we have the back-to-back quarterbacks. Daniels and May are very likely to go 2 and 3. It seems like Daniels is probably going to be the guy for Washington, May probably the guy for the Patriots, but that's definitely not set in stone. But it is very likely that whatever team's taking them, they're going 2 and 3 regardless of order. Both these guys have some really nice rushing upside at the quarterback position. And then I did finally bump J.J. McCarthy up into this tier. He's minus 140 to go in the top 5 picks, so it does seem like more likely than not a team is going to trade up and get him in one of those spots. If he lands with the Vikings, that would obviously be great. Of all the quarterback needy teams out there, the Vikings would probably be the best overall landing spot. You would just have great weapons from day one, and then also just a great offensive-minded head coach. The only reason why he's a little bit below May and Daniels is that I just don't think he has the same rushing upside that those guys have. So I think his long-term upside might be a little bit capped, but the landing spot could be really huge here for J.J. McCarthy. And then we have Brock Bowers in between those quarterbacks. Bowers is just a straight-up elite tight end prospect. I think he has a very realistic ceiling of being a high-end tight end 1 for a very long time, and I just think that's slightly more valuable than a really strong wide receiver prospect like Rome Odunze, who I have right after him. So that does, give Bowers the edge in my opinion. So that's going to be tier 2. Now pivoting into tier 3, another kind of large tier here. We're going Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Michael Penix Jr., Troy Franklin, A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Brooks, and Trey Benson. So a pretty solid mix here positionally. Brian Thomas Jr. is my clear wide receiver 4. Looks like he's going to be drafted somewhere around pick 20, maybe late teens, early 20s. Then for the Texas wide receivers, I think Worthy and Mitchell are both going to go in round 1. It seems like A.D. Mitchell has the better odds, but they probably, both find their way drafted somewhere late in the first round. And there are some pretty interesting landing spots back there with like the Bills, Chiefs, so that could definitely help them out. Just getting all the wide receivers out of the way here. For Troy Franklin, he's probably going to go day 2. Seems very unlikely he goes day 1, but I'm definitely higher on him than consensus. And then Ladd McConkey, the last wide receiver in this tier, it seems like he's definitely gaining some hype to be a round 1 pick. I think a couple days ago he was maybe like 2 to 1 to go in round 1. Now I think it's like even odds, 50-50. So he's definitely interesting. Like I said, a lot of decent landing spots towards the back end of the first round. And then you have Michael Penix Jr. kind of in between all these wide receivers. And the draft capital on Penix and Bo Nix have both been kind of up in the air. At one point, like before the national championship, it seemed like Penix could be a top 10 guy. Bo Nix maybe more of a second rounder. Then it seemed like at some point it flipped where the Broncos may have been looking at Bo Nix with their first round pick. Penix may be a second round guy. At this point, obviously we can't go all in on the odds, but that's why I'm going to be updating this after the draft. Penix is currently minus 230 to go in the first round. compared to Bo Nix, who is more likely to go in the second round. So if that first round draft capital sticks and he gets a decent landing spot here, he'll likely be a top 12 rookie pick, and I think most people would probably agree with that. And then to close out this tier, Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson. These are my top 2 running backs. You're hoping they find their way picked in round 2, and then you're also just hoping that one of the top running backs ends up landing with the Cowboys. Now looking at tier 4, got a quarterback, a wide receiver, 2 more running backs. It's going to be Bo Nix, Keon Coleman, Jalen Wright, and Blake Corum. So like I mentioned, Bo Nix is minus 240 to go outside the first round, so pretty much just as likely to go outside the first as Michael Penix is to actually get drafted in the first round. So that second round capital, definitely not as great, but he could still find himself in a solid situation, especially like he's been tied to the Broncos. Maybe the Broncos go and get him in the second round. That would still be a pretty decent landing spot for him, just given that their quarterback room is wide open. For Keon Coleman, probably a day 2 guy at the wide receiver position. He's pretty much like the last dude in a tier for my wide receiver position. And then the running backs, Wright and Corum, currently both like mid round 2 rookie picks in my opinion. Landing spot and draft capital will obviously play a big role for these running backs, as it does with pretty much everyone at the running back position, especially with no like locked in top guy this year, at least like consensus wise. Now looking at tier 5, a lot of wide receivers and then 1 running back here. We're going Xavier Legette, Jalen Polk, Marshawn Lloyd, Ricky Pearsall, Roman Wilson, and then Jalen McMillan. I think Xavier Legette actually has a shot to go round 1. If he doesn't go round 1, probably early round 2 at the latest, like late round 2. He had a huge 5th year, pretty much no production before that, which is something that we'll also see with Ricky Pearsall. He had more production in year 3 and year 4, but year 5 was really the one huge year for him also. Then we have Polk and McMillan, both from Washington, playing in the same wide receiver room as Rome Odunze. So all these guys were producing. It'll be interesting to see if, maybe playing behind Rome Odunze helped them out, or if you just have 3 really, really talented wide receivers, like we've seen in other situations where if you have a huge top guy, it can sometimes, cloud the production of really strong wide receivers playing behind them. But you could also kind of have like the Terrace Marshall situation where he's playing behind Chase and Jefferson, still producing. You might wonder like, oh, could this guy be really good? He's just stashed behind 2 studs. Turns out not really. So it really could go either way. A lot of people are going to have those guys really close in their rankings, and I do also. They're in the same tier here. Then looking at Roman Wilson, coming off his best season, just under 800 receiving yards, 12 touchdowns, ran very well at the combine. And then Marshawn Lloyd here at the running back position. I have him in the same tier as Corum and Wright, but I just think he's slightly below those guys. But I do think he's decently ahead of the running backs I have in tier 6. And now looking at tier 6, we're going to start off back at the tight end position. We'll start off with Jatavion Sanders, another tight end in Ben Sinnott, then 2 running backs, Audric Estime and Bucky Irving. Sanders and Sinnott are the expected tight end 2 and tight end 3 in this class. I think originally it was Jatavion Sanders was going to be like the clear tight end 2. Since then, Sinnott has actually closed the distance on him, and I believe he's actually the favorite to be the number 2 off the board. Both these guys are solid receiving threats. Sanders put up really strong seasons, both as a sophomore and a junior. 600 plus receiving yards in both of those. Sinnott went for just under 700 receiving yards in 2023. Their 40 times were both pretty similar. Neither guy is like blazing speed, but Sinnott just pretty much dominated every other metric at the combine where I don't think Sanders tested. And then for the running backs, Estime and Irving, if I had to, continue these rankings, you would have a bunch more running backs in this tier that just didn't quite make it here, like Braylon Allen, Will Shipley. I might be forgetting someone else, but this is a much larger tier at the running backs. I do have my running back rankings up also, but that's going to wrap it up for my top 30. Kind of just a quick run through. It'll be interesting to see how these change after the NFL draft. So let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.